I decided to do a tribute to all those people who made Las Vegas what it is. Frank and Dean and Sam and Bobby Darin and on.
They called him Mr. Las Vegas, the man with the permanent tan, the dazzling smile, and a voice so silky it could quiet a storm. For decades, Wayne Newton wasn't just a performer. He was a symbol of charm, of timeless glamour, of the American showbiz dream. He sold out theaters night after night, rubbed shoulders with presidents and mobsters, and stood shoulder to shoulder with the likes of Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra. And yet, behind that iconic tuxedo and rehearsed elegance was a man unraveling quietly and painfully for decades. Now, at 83, the tragedy of Wayne Newton is no longer a secret. What happened to the golden boy of Las Vegas? How did a man who once seemed untouchable, adored by millions, end up burdened by lawsuits, betrayal, and isolation? The truth isn't just shocking, it's heartbreaking. Because Wayne Newton didn't fall in one dramatic moment. His descent came slowly, like a curtain lowering 1 inch at a time, until the stage was empty and the spotlight went cold. This is the story of how one of the most adored entertainers in American history became one of its most forgotten, and how even now he sings, not for glory, but for survival. There was a time when Wayne Newton couldn't walk 5 feet down the Vegas Strip without being mobbed. He wasn't just a star, he was the embodiment of the city itself. Long before Cirque du Soleil or EDM DJs flooded the desert, Wayne Newton ruled Las Vegas with nothing more than a microphone, a smile, and a tuxedo. His name lit up marquees like royalty. In fact, it wasn't uncommon for fans to refer to him as the King of Las Vegas, a title he wore not with arrogance, but with pride. He earned it. From the age of 15, Newton was singing for sold-out audiences, and by the early 1970s, he had become a mainstay in the city's elite venues, often performing over 40 weeks a year. He was tireless, and the city rewarded him with endless applause. Born in Norfolk, Virginia, Newton's early life was anything but glamorous. He was sickly as a child, frequently bedridden with asthma, but music gave him strength. Inspired by Native American melodies and country western roots, he learned to play multiple instruments and began performing on local television as a child prodigy. But it was his older brother, Jerry, who first convinced a young Wayne to take a shot at Vegas. They arrived in the desert with little more than matching suits and big dreams, and quickly caught the attention of talent scouts. Soon, Wayne was on stage at the Fremont Hotel, and within a few years, he had become the city's sweetheart. But what truly set Newton apart wasn't just his voice. It was his chameleon-like appeal. Women adored him, men respected him, and casino bosses? They practically worshipped him. His biggest hit, Dankeschön, catapulted him to national fame, but it was his connection with live audiences that cemented his legacy. Night after night, he charmed thousands with a soft-spoken humility that seemed almost unbelievable. Was it an act? Maybe, but it worked. By the 1980s, Newton was commanding multi-million-dollar contracts, buying private jets, Arabian horses, and sprawling mansions, including his now infamous estate, Casa de Shenandoah. But beneath the glitter of that perfect smile, something was shifting. Newton was burning the candle at both ends, performing relentlessly, managing a complex empire, and juggling a lifestyle that most would find impossible to sustain. And unlike his contemporaries, Newton was no longer protected by a studio system or old-school handlers. He was his own brand, his own boss, and his own shield. And cracks were beginning to show. Many insiders say Newton struggled with the very thing he was known for, his image. As the industry evolved, his signature style began to feel outdated. Where once he was suave, now he was called plastic. His face, a subject of countless tabloid rumors, became a symbol of the man himself, always trying to preserve what time was trying to erase. Behind the curtain, Newton reportedly battled vocal strain, financial strain, and emotional fatigue. Yet he kept performing. Why? Because for Wayne Newton, the stage wasn't just where he thrived, it was where he hid. For every standing ovation, there was a late-night phone call about debts. For every glowing review, a lawsuit waiting in the wings. And yet through it all he smiled. The city still loved him. The fans still applauded. But somewhere along the way, Wayne Newton stopped singing for the people and began singing for the past. By the mid-1990s, Wayne Newton was no longer just a beloved entertainer. He was a walking paradox. While the lights on the Las Vegas Strip still lit up his name and the applause never quite faded, behind the velvet curtain, his world was collapsing. The empire he'd spent decades building, brick by brick, show by show, was riddled with lawsuits, debts, and deceit. And the most painful part? Much of the damage came not from strangers, but from people he once trusted. The cracks began with money. Newton had never lived modestly. His estate, Casa de Shenandoah, was a sprawling 40-acre compound, complete with exotic animals, private jets, rare cars, and the kind of opulence that seemed ripped from the pages of a movie script. But behind the ornate gates and marble columns, the finances were crumbling. Decades of non-stop performances had brought in millions, but the costs of maintaining his image were astronomical. In the early 2000s, it was revealed that Newton was $20 million in debt, including unpaid taxes, liens from creditors, and lawsuits from former business partners. One of the most damaging lawsuits came from Newton's failed attempt to turn Casa de Shenandoah into a museum and tourist attraction. The plan was ambitious: open his estate to the public as a living tribute to the King of Las Vegas. But behind the scenes, it turned into a war. Disputes with investors turned ugly. Allegations flew: mismanagement, broken contracts, unpaid bills. Newton claimed he was being misled. The investors claimed he was in denial. Eventually, the legal battles became public spectacles, with both sides airing their grievances in court and in the media. And then there was the betrayal. Staff who had worked for Newton for years suddenly turned into witnesses. Bodyguards, assistants, even family acquaintances began testifying about the chaos behind closed doors. Some claimed Newton was out of touch with reality, living in a fantasy world where applause could drown out accountability. Others described a man desperately trying to hold on to a past that no longer existed. A man who believed that if he just smiled long enough, the darkness would pass. But it didn't. The IRS came knocking. Newton, who had once earned more than $1 million a week during the peak of his career, now found himself selling off assets just to stay afloat. He auctioned memorabilia, downsized operations, and even moved out of his own estate. For a man who had been a symbol of success for so long, the fall wasn't just financial, it was spiritual. Because Wayne Newton didn't just lose money, he lost his illusion of control. What made it worse was how the world responded. The same media that once celebrated him now turned cruel. Late-night comedians mocked his plastic surgery, his debts, his failed business ventures. Tabloids ran headlines like, "Wayne Newton's fortune gone with the wind," and "Mr. Las Vegas now Mr. Bankruptcy." It was public humiliation on a grand scale. And for a man whose entire brand was built on dignity and class, it cut deeper than any lawsuit. And yet, Wayne Newton never lashed out. He didn't sit down for explosive tell-all interviews. He didn't throw former employees under the bus. He didn't play the victim. Instead, he kept showing up. Small gigs, private concerts, benefit performances, always dressed to perfection, always smiling. It was as if he believed that, by continuing to perform, he could somehow rewrite the narrative, outrun the headlines, and sing his way back into grace. But the industry had changed. Younger acts now headlined Vegas. The crowds he once captivated were now captivated by cirque shows and modern pop icons. Newton's name was still respected, but it no longer commanded the weight it once did. The tragedy wasn't that Wayne Newton was forgotten. It was that he was remembered for the wrong reasons. Not for his voice or charm, but for his downfall, and still he refused to quit. Because for Wayne Newton, the stage wasn't just a job. It was his last defense against a world that had turned cold. A place where, for just a few hours, he could still be the man he once was. Mr. Las Vegas. By the time Wayne Newton entered his late 70s, the weight of his decades-long performance schedule began to take a visible toll. For a man who had spent over 50 years standing under hot stage lights, belting out melodies with grace and charisma, his body was beginning to betray him. His voice, once the smooth, velvet soundtrack of Las Vegas, grew weaker, more brittle. His posture, once upright and commanding, now slumped. He began to cancel shows, reschedule appearances, and perform less frequently, not because he wanted to, but because he physically couldn't. But the cruelest twist wasn't just age, it was what came with it. As Newton's health declined, so too did his financial lifelines. Despite attempts to recover from bankruptcy and legal battles, his income streams were drying up. The estate once envisioned as a legacy monument, Casa de Shenandoah, was lost in legal chaos and foreclosure. His beloved horses were sold off. His once private sanctuary turned into a tourist attraction operated by others. Newton, who had once dined with presidents and princes, was now struggling just to protect the remnants of what he had left. There were reports of multiple hospital visits, though the details were always kept vague. Close friends mentioned recurring issues, chronic fatigue, respiratory struggles, and complications from stress. He was no longer the tireless showman performing 40-plus weeks a year. Now, every performance required careful preparation, pain management, and rehearsed pacing. The voice that once brought thousands to their feet was reduced to a whisper at times, a devastating irony for a man whose identity was rooted in song. If this story has moved you even a little, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. These aren't just stories about celebrities. They're about real people, real pain, and the hidden cost of fame. Let's keep these voices alive by remembering the full story, not just the spotlight. What stung most wasn't the money or the sickness, it was the silence from the industry. Wayne Newton, once courted by every talk show and record label, now found himself absent from the national conversation. Vegas had moved on. The new generation of performers brought fire and spectacle, but none of the old-world charm Newton embodied. As ticket sales dwindled and offers slowed, he was forced to confront a truth that few legends survive to witness. Fame doesn't fade, it vanishes. Newton's attempts to remain in the public eye were met with mixed results. He took on appearances in reality shows, lent his voice to animated characters, and even performed small sets in aging Vegas lounges. But nothing recaptured the electricity of the past. To younger audiences, he was a name, nothing more. And to older fans, he was a memory struggling to keep up with reality. Even when he smiled, people could see it in his eyes. The heartbreak of being a relic in a city he once ruled. And yet, even through all of this, Newton never lashed out. No bitter interviews, no tell-all books, no desperate scandals. His grace, though quieter, never left him. In private, he was reportedly devastated. A source close to him once said, "Wayne wakes up every day thinking about how to get it back. The stage, the crowd, the love. But the world doesn't wait, not even for kings." Some nights, Newton would still show up, suited, styled, smiling, to small VIP rooms or charity events. But it was no longer about money or fame. It was about something more tragic, proving to himself that he was still Wayne Newton. That the man the world once screamed for wasn't just a ghost in an old playbill. That his story wasn't over, even if no one was listening.